Hello, all. Sorry, I had to like get my jacket. It's a little cold in here. So a little over air conditioned. Welcome and thank you so much for coming to this, the first installment of the Visiting Writers series here at Colorado College. I'm Nate Marshall. I'll be our interlocutor for the day, and I'm an assistant professor of English here at Colorado College. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that Colorado College is located within the unceded territory of the Ute peoples. The earliest documented people also include the Apache, Arapaho, Comanche, and Cheyenne. These lands have long been a site for creativity and knowledge making, and we welcome the sacred opportunity to continue in that spirit. We also recognize that land acknowledgement without a serious commitment to justice is hollow. I want to quote my colleague, Professor Natanya Pulley. She says, when we acknowledge the land and First Peoples, we also honor time and that cruel and beautiful way. The past is never truly in the past, but carries forward to today, to right now. Through thoughtful and purposeful acknowledgements, we begin to unravel the narrative of settler colonialism and dismantle the structures that have kept that narrative at the forefront, not only the forefront of not only the land's history, but our day-to-day engagement with the world around us and within us. Wonderful. So just before we get started, I want to offer a couple of thank yous and then of course, introduce our distinguished guests for the evening. So first, I'd like to thank the Visiting Writer Series Committee. That committee is composed of myself, Professor Brandon Shimoda, Professor Aileen Lowe, and our chair, Natanya Pulley. I would like to thank Erica Hardcastle, our wonderful administrator, for her support in helping make this happen. Don, who is currently running the technical pieces of this. And of course, I would like to thank the press at CC for their support on posters for the event and for a beautiful limited edition broadside of the Gwendolyn Brooks poem Infirm, which can be purchased at their website. And I'll post the link to that soon, but I just want to just show folks this. This is like one of the first printings. Nora, you have some coming in the mail, so look forward to that. And let me just read the names of the students who helped design this. So I want to acknowledge gratefully David Elijah Brown, Veronica Gibson, Paul O, Ace Taylor, and Mar Wilson for helping make this happen. And of course, Aaron Kohik, who so ably runs the press at CC. So shout out to all y'all, appreciate it. And now I want to read just Nora's bio and introduce her, and we can get this conversation going. I'm really excited for this conversation. Oh, what's up, Paul? I see you in the chat. All right. Nora Brooks Blakely, a former teacher in the Chicago Public Schools, founded Chocolate Chips Theater Company, which ran from 1982 to 2011 and was its primary playwright. Ms. Blakely is the daughter of two writers, Henry Blakely and Gwendolyn Brooks. She founded Brooks Permissions in 2001. The company licenses and promotes her mother's work and develops continuing publications which demonstrate Gwendolyn Brooks' continuing relevance. Nora's first picture book, which is very exciting, Moyenda and the Golden Heart, is an origin tale for Kwanzaa. It will be released this fall, so like very soon. Now, just speaking personally for myself, Nora is a wonderful steward of her mother's work, and in her own right, a cherished member of the Chicago artistic community. I'm really glad to have gotten a chance to know her. We've come to know each other over the last many years through contributing to Brooks Day events celebrating her mom's birthday, June 7th every year. And we also had the opportunity to interface through work with the multimedia play, No Blue Memories, The Life of Gwendolyn Brooks, which was written by myself and Eve Ewing for Manual Cinema and the Poetry Foundation. And this is kind of the most serendipitous connection that I think we have, is that we were neighbors in Chicago when I had the truly accidental, great fortune to buy a home next door to Nora. And so, you know, every time I get to talk to her and reconnect, it's always a pleasure. Nora, thank you so much for being here today. How are you? Wait.
Okay, there we go. I am
it.
so glad to be here. I'm very excited, um, and curious as to a conversation can go in so many directions, and so
Absolutely.
it'll be very interesting to see just what pathways uh, we go down in this session. So, yay!
No, absolutely. Huh? So, so for all the folks watching, if you have questions, feel free to just drop them in the Q&A box. You can also drop them in the chat, I guess, but I'll be watching the Q&A box sort of specifically for those things. And we'll open it up to questions. I have a few things just to get us started. Yeah, and we'll go from there. So my first question, right? We know that Brooks Permissions was founded in 2001 to sort of handle your mother's literary estate, you know, if you will. But can you just talk to us some about, I guess, the structure and just how it came into being?
Well, it was one of those things. I was already running chocolate chips. And as you mentioned, I continued with chocolate chips until 2011. So this was kind of necessity, being the mother of invention, or inventing something for my mother as this necessity. So um, when when Mama was with us, she had a rather interesting way of handling requests for licensing of her work. A lot of times she would just write on the letter that somebody wrote to her and just say, okay, that'll be X amount. And then and we're still getting some of those letters from people where they send back and say, no, see, she really did say that we could do this for X number of years or whatever. And so we thought that we needed something a little bit more structured than that to make this work. And so we started. Originally, it was me. It was Cynthia Walls, who also, bless her heart, worked with Chocolate Chips Theater Company. Um, and she was the operations manager there. I was producing artistic director. And so, and we've also been best friends for 8,000 years. And so we've kind of like just kind of moved along on different projects with each other and stuff. So we went ahead and decided that we were going to do this. And Carolyn Aquila, a Chicago poet, also had been doing some stuff for my mother, as well as management, administration kinds of things, after her 30-year agent, Beryl Zitch, had passed away. So the three of us came together and we started trying to create something where we could do licensing. And at first, all we were really interested in was focusing on the licensing. But then it began to expand because it became clear that to maintain this legacy, it was important to also continue to promote her work in different ways. And so that's what we started doing. We had a group that I would really like to bring back at some point. It was called Aurora Performance Group,
Absolutely.
APG.
Yeah, Aurora. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so we took works of Mama's and created presentations that were dramatic performances of her work, but also some of her work we set to music. And we had phenomenal singers. And so we had that as something that we went around and did. Then we began to expand to other things. One of the things is graphic Gwendolines, where we basically have taken Oh, show and tell. Yay, Nate.
Yeah, we some of
um,
the students that are in the Brooks class, we read this one today, and we had a really good conversation about Two Boys. So.
I want to hear about that, actually.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll get to it. If not, we'll talk offline. Yeah, for sure.
So, so yes. So actually it's an illustrated poetry series. It's basically setting my mother's work to in a comic book style. And we wanted something we had created, of course, we had seasons. I was looking around. I don't see it right now. But we had seasons, the book that we created in the centennial year. I know, I don't see it either. I don't know why that is, but it ran away. Uh, but we did that. But we wanted something, but that's a book of poetry and memories, etc. It's like $17.95 for the paperback, $27.95 for the hardbound. We wanted something, and that's where Graphic Gwendolyn came in, that people could do more as an impulse buy. The first one was $2. The second one was twice as big, and it was $5. But we wanted something that people could do. Oh, I can tip into a little bit of poetry here, and just kind of sneak up on it. And so the first one, song in the front yard, one of Mama's earliest poems, was just that one poem, and people can see that it's set up as in a comic book format. So so I can't hold off. Just tell me a little bit about what people said about Two Boys.
Yeah. Well, we had a sort of a really interesting conversation just about. I like how the Q&A has like reversed. We had an interesting conversation about the sort of space between those two poems, about maybe what had sort of happened historically between the moment when the first poem Tommy was written and the second poem, what is it, Boy Died in My Alley?
Yes.
Boy Shot in My, like so just like what has sort of happened in the world, why and why the sort of, I guess, the frame of the poems feels so different. And we also had a really interesting conversation about what it does, I guess, maybe to like questions of access, to put a poem or a set of poems in this kind of format versus a more traditional anthology like Seasons or Blacks, or any of the various like selected pieces that have been put out over the years. So your mom's work and just writer's work generally.
So cool. Okay. One of the things about Two Boys, I raised the question because, of course, as you're mentioning, the first one is just so cute and pretty, and that was from Brownsville Boys and Girls, which came out in the 1950s. And then yes, it takes a hard right, and there's that list of statistics about what's happening with a lot of young Black men, and then going into the poem. But the question that I raised is, what if this is the same boy? What if that little boy that put the seed into the ground, all wonderful and expecting and innocent, what if over the years he has ended up being the boy that is the chalk outline in the alley? So how does that happen, and how can we make that not happen?
Yeah.
So yeah, so we're trying to do, we're trying to really, so much of Mama's work is still so incredibly relevant, sometimes scarily so. And we want people to understand that the mission of Books and Missions is demonstrating the continuing relevance of the life and work of Gwendolyn Brooks. And so that is one of the things that we tried to do. And there are only 4 of us doing this. It's just a little tiny little organization, just a little company. And I mentioned Cynthia Wall, she's our vice president. Pam Williams is our client services manager, and Darius Colquitt, who also has his own company, BAM Talent, .org, let me say that, and that Black Arts Matter. But he is what we call him our tech face. He does all the stuff that you see happening on our Facebook page, and if you see little mini videos and different things like that, that's all the work that he's put in. So we're just trying to keep that moving, to keep that going.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, this is sparking so many different thoughts and connections. But I don't want to like get too far afield. But to your point, you did talk about sort of how small of the operation is, and I wonder, one, just like, can you talk a little bit about the decision to keep it like a relatively sort of intimate shop in that way, and I guess if that presents any particular challenges or opportunities, right? And or you could just, and also I'm curious about the just the challenges and opportunities with doing this kind of literary stewardship broadly.
Oh yeah, sure, that's easy to answer. Okay, it's small because that's what we can afford. We commission ourselves a percentage of the licensing. We have royalties from the season's book, and so forth. So there's only a certain amount of people that can be supported by that. So that's one of the reasons. Even however, if we were making masses and masses of money, I don't think that we would want it to be too much bigger, because we're a family. We are all Gwen geeks, where we are deeply committed to this whole this whole concept and the support of this legacy. And so we don't have anybody that's just doing it to collect a check. Everybody is really committed to this idea of making this work. So that's one of the reasons. As far as the pros and cons of managing a legacy, some things just have to happen. And there's an organization here in Chicago called History Makers. And at one point, and so it's all of these different people in all different Black folks in different disciplines, different genres. There might be somebody who's a history person. There might be political people, artists, journalists, all these different kinds of people. And they interview people, and then they record that history. So so then what happens with that is that in one meeting, they actually talked about how that maybe, I think it was like something like 2%, just like 2% of the people that were on their lists of history makers had any kind of archive anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's just that.
Oh no. There you go. Wait, Nora, you're muted. Oh, you're muted. You dropped out for a second. Sorry about that. Yeah. All right, there you go. Yeah. So you were talking about folks not having archives.
Yes, that history makers at a particular event said that there were maybe 2% of the people that were in their history maker archives had their own independent archives, just like 2%. So you think of all these Black folks that are history worthy, and yet there's no place for people to really continue to learn more about them. And so that is one of the reasons that we do, what we do, that there need to be people. I've been at the American Library Association annual conferences, and there would be people that would come up. One year we had a table, and there would be people that would come up to our table, and they were librarians, public librarians, sometimes children's librarians, and they had no idea who Mama was. And yeah, that's a little distressing. I don't expect everybody to know who Gwendolyn Brooks is, but public library professional librarians not knowing, that's a little distressing. So the thing is that by any means necessary, through setting her let me go back and try that again. That by any means necessary, whether it's setting her poetry to music, whether it's making it a comic book, whether it's doing things like we did last year, where we did the Whirlwind Connection, and encourage people to buy her books, not only for themselves, but also to donate to schools, to libraries, etc. And so all of those different things and other things that we're coming up with, we're very excited. Next year, we're going to be doing the GB7 series. The 7th day of every month, we will have a different entity, organization, or a group of individuals who will look at Mama from a different point of view that is in some way connected with the kind of things that they do. So for instance, February, we're going to be doing, the forum will be on Two Boys. And it's going to be with people who have worked with incarcerated young men, at risk young boys, etc. And so talking about that and looking at that through the prism also of her work. So we'll just be doing different things each month. So and everyone should know that there's a month coming up called A Pack of Poets, where we are inviting your lovely professor to be a part of that. So you'll be getting that letter soon. So,
wonderful. I look forward to it. Yes. Cool. So yeah, thank you. I do want to I want to maybe transition the conversation a little bit, right? So we've talked a lot about the sort of like the joys and the challenges and the necessities of kind of preserving and expanding your mother's legacy. But I'm really interested in how, I guess, how you contend with these things yourself, right? Like you are a playwright in your own right, a sort of newly minted picture book author. And so for you, I guess, how has that path, have you negotiated your mother's legacy? How is, your mother's legacy been a thing that has been sort of something that you've wanted to either step into or diverge from? In that, I imagine it's like, that is maybe not an uncomplicated consideration given, given despite, I guess, like the lack of knowledge of some librarians, like your mom really looms large, certainly in the city of Chicago, but I mean, really over all of American letters. So yeah, just how do you think about that as you chart your own path?
I mentioned in the class that part of the saving grace for me may be that I didn't start out taking myself seriously as a writer. I wrote because everybody in my family wrote. My brother wrote music, and at one point was kind of a folk guitarist. And yeah, Henry can do anything. If he sets his mind to it, he studies it for hours and days and weeks and years, and then he just does it. He was also a photographer that had his own shows, and he's a digital, and he is a digital artist. So yes, but he wrote. My father, as I mentioned, wrote. And as we all know, my mother wrote. So everybody wrote. So do you eat? Do you sleep? Do you breathe? Do you read? Do you write? These were just all kind of like all in the same little bucket in my family. So, but I didn't see myself seriously as a writer, as a child, or even as a young adult. I wanted to be a teacher, and I became a teacher. And then besides teaching, I got interested in theater and in dance. And I was very briefly, part of Moon 2 Dance Theater here in Chicago. And I was also part of Obasi, the writers organization. Well, beyond writers, but they're best known for the writers. And Kuumba Theater, where I spent several years before I branched out and created my own theater company. So those were all things I was doing. And then I started writing, but even when I started writing more seriously, I was in a whole different field. I was writing some stories, mostly plays and musicals. And so I didn't feel that I was in some kind of race, with mama, or some kind of competition. I was very clear on the fact that she was just awesome. And then and let's see what I can do in this field over here. So there was never really any competition or anything like that. So and then my mother's feelings about it also. She certainly didn't feel any sense of competition. If she came to see a play or anything, it was very much, oh, you're so wonderful. Oh, that is so great. And something, that's who she was. Now, as I mentioned in the class, if I gave her a poem that I had written, that was different.
Right. The red pen came out.
The red pen came out. She would bleed all over the page. Mama left. Gwendolyn Brooks sat down at the table and prepared to do her thing. So that's how. But she was always really supportive of what I was doing, and came out to see the different plays. So my plays were things like all things that had to do with Black history and culture, but in very different ways. So there was Switch West or Switch, which focuses on Black folks going out west. And the two main characters, one of them is a person who escaped slavery and became a Buffalo Soldier, and has now retired from that. And the other is somebody who has run away from sharecropping. And so Jericho, the former Buffalo Soldier, takes him under his wing, kind of reluctantly. But the thing is that most people still to this day don't realize that roughly about 40% of the cowboys were Black. And so when they get out west, you get to meet all of these different people, the different women who have the different societies, and everything, and are encouraging people to read and so forth. And there's a character who's the cook, whose name is James Brown, and he might just be related to somebody that we've heard of in later days, so that kind of thing. Completely different from that, Grimm Goodies. I took Grimm's fairy tales and I did things to them. Rapunzel was Rapunzel, and she had long extension braids, and she lived in a high rise in the city. So
that's outstanding. That's fantastic.
So Cinderella was a young woman who didn't have a fairy godmother, but the magic man who came in, and she learned that the prince had 2 brain cells equally spaced, and she wasn't interested in him. So she doesn't end up with him. She ends up with somebody else.
Wait, Nora, wait, one moment.
Yes.
So I don't, apologies for interrupting you, but you have to read something for us, right? You have this book coming out that is sort of a kind of origin story of Kwanzaa, right? Kwanzaa, for those who don't know, African-American holiday that sort of takes place within that sort of space of Christmas and the New Year. But yeah, can you read something for us? Can you like offer us a tale or whatnot? And then maybe we'll
In fact, that's 2 different things, because I can read something for you. It's shorter than the storybook, but Moyenda and the Golden Heart is the storybook, and the idea is that it's an origin tale for Kwanzaa. So for people who don't know, as Nate was just saying, it's a 7-day holiday, and it has 7 principles. So Umoja, unity; Kujichagulia, self-determination; Ujima, collective worker responsibility; Ujamaa, cooperative economics; Nia, purpose; Kuumba, creativity; and Imani, faith. Whew. I was hoping I didn't just blank out in the middle of that. But the holiday was created by Ron Karenga in the 1960s. My premise is, what if that's not really the way it happened? What if hundreds of years ago, in a mythical place in Africa, there's this place called Village, where there is a young boy, Moyenda, who hears about this treasure called the Golden Heart. And he decides to go out and look for this golden heart that he can bring back, all of these riches to bring back to his village. And so that is the premise of the story, the idea that we're bringing it back, that from way back, that this moved forward, and that there was already this sense of these 7 principles in the heart, in the spirit, before of the community, before it was even formally created by Ron Karenga. So that's the idea for that. And but the story, because that's a little longer, so this is shorter. It's called Why the Wind Moans. And I love folklore. I am particularly drawn to origin or pourquoi, French for why, tales. So coming up with the reasons of how things came to be. And so this is Why the Wind Moans. Once, far from now, but close to then, the sun laughed. Its bright yellow beams tickled the birds as they danced on the flat, broad leaves of the rustling, chortling trees. Everyone was happy because Delela was getting married. Delela was the wind, and she was about to marry Moyo, one of the northern rivers. Delela thought cheerfully of the great plans she and Moyo had made. Together, they would bring cool breezes of comfort and refreshment to this hot land. As she thought of these things, Delela skipped and whirled. Her soft gold and blue dress whirling out from her delicate chocolate body, stirring the air gently. Moyo was happy too. He thought of the great treasures he was bringing Delela, his cool waters, the northern plants, and fish that would travel with him. These things people in her land had never seen. As he dressed, he hummed and chuckled, the silver cloth flowing over his midnight skin. Siwatu was not happy. He was Moyo's father, the great northern sea. Although he had many sons, he was greedy and did not want any of them to escape, for that would weaken his powerful magic. Besides, Moyo wished to take gifts with him, gifts Suwatu felt were really his. This was more than he could stand. He brooded over this for a long time, his waters roiling heavily in anger. Suddenly, he knew what he would do. So the people of the hot lands wanted cool breezes, did they? Well, they would see. Yes, they would see. Moyo was ready to leave. He began to flow in the direction that would take him to Delela, but something was wrong. He felt as he was made of soft, thick mud. Why couldn't he move any faster than this? And those sharp pains, what was happening to him? Fear began to grow. He realized his brothers had been right all along. This had to be Sawatu's magic. His father would never let him leave. Moyo was slowly freezing, but what could he do? Delela. Delela was warm. If he could reach her, her soft breezes would stop this horrible magic. All night he crept more and more slowly, moving painfully toward Delela's land. He was almost solidly frozen when Delela finally saw him. Moyo gathered his last energy and leapt toward Delela in one great swell, but it was too late, and he froze completely. Delela shrieked and blew, but he was so cold, the cool breezes they had dreamed of became icy gusts that froze her heart. Our days and nights are much colder now. Moyo tried so hard to reach the one he loved that it is only on the hottest days we do not feel his cold, heavy nearness. And Delela? Well, now maybe you will understand. On these ice-grated days and nights of frozen light, you will hear her screech and moan as she stretches and rips the rocks and trees, because she remembers. Yes, she remembers. And her song is as chill as the glacier that was once her love.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I mean, yeah, I love that. So I want to transition, if we can, to a few questions from the audience. So we have a couple already, and if there hopefully more will come in. But the first one, it comes from Professor Brandon Shimoda. And Brandon writes, "Hi, Nora. Thanks so much for being here. My question is this. In thinking about your relationship to and your life alongside your mother's work, I'm wondering if you still make discoveries about it that surprise you, or things that you didn't know or notice before, or that reveal themselves in new ways." So that's from Professor Shimoda.
Yes. Okay, yes. I won't just leave that hanging. Definitely. There are wonderful, wonderful things that I find in her writing all the time. There are poems that I have read and I ranted and raged in the class about people who felt that my mother's work after 1967 wasn't as complex, as lyrical and so forth as her work before that. And as I said, I don't know who they've been reading, because there are still poems that I read that I have to go back and go, wait, what? Let me go back through this again. And that's true of pieces before and after 1967. Riders to the Blood Red Wrath, there's still a section in that poem that I'm working on. You know, I think that poem is so powerful, and I love that poem. And then there are the ones that I think I get, and then somebody else comes along and says something, and I go, oh wow. Tahim Bajest does this breakdown of the poem Negro Hero, which was Dory Miller-ish, the Black hero from World War II, and he breaks that down. I've heard it twice now, and I'm just like this, because I think it is just so incredibly awesome. You know, what he has seen in that poem, and I look at it and go, "Oh my God, yes, of course." But yeah, so and then the way that my mother handles language. There's a piece in Maud Martha, I think it's chapter 34, where she talks about the blooms in the street. And as you read on, you realize that the blooms are the people. That's who she's referring to as the blooms. And I just thought that that was just so incredibly awesome. So yes, there are definitely, I don't think that you can stop learning from my mother's work. I think that that is an ongoing experience.
Yeah, for sure. So we have some more questions. This one comes from Rain Fox, and Rain asks, how, if at all, has your mother's work influenced the form and technicality of your own work?
Well, the first part of that is an easy answer for me, and that is that, as I said to her when she was still here, that we had formed an alliterative alliance, because I am an alliteration junkie, and if you've read even one poem of my mother's, you know that alliteration is alive. Oh, I just did it again. Okay, alive and well in a tremendous amount of her work, and I just love the feel of that, and so that appears in a lot of what I write. So there's that. Form, not so much, because of course I dove into plays and stories, and yet I was at a writer's retreat, and nobody knew anything about my mother, because if I go to a writing retreat, I never tell anybody about my mother. Possibly at the end of the retreat, if I think it's relevant, but never during it. That is a no-win situation. If I do something well, then the response would be, well, of course, because after all, her mother is Gwendolyn Brooks. And if I do something they don't like, it's, well, I thought she would have done better than that because her mother was Gwendolyn Brooks. So yeah, don't do that. But several people, including the facilitator, kept talking about how lyrical, how poetic the story that I was doing was. And I'm just cracking up laughing, because it's just poetry. It's just such poetry. And it's like, really?
Did you ever tell them? Did you ever be like, well, yeah, of course it's poetry. It's in my blood.
I did confess to the facilitator the last day, and she's like, that explains a lot. So yes.
Okay.
So being around not just Mama, but around all the other poets from and growing up reading poetry. So Langston Hughes, of course, Audre Lorde, of course, Michael Anania, Robert Frost, blah, 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 blah. you know, that did inch its way into, you know, into my head, you know. So yeah, so that is, so there is some of that. I
Wonderful.
don't credit myself with being nearly as meticulous as Mama was. I can't, I can't take that award. But what I will say is that a lot of that also impacted me. The feeling of of that if you capitalize a word, there's a reason why you did that. If you break a line in a particular place, there's a reason why you did that. You know, it didn't just, well, I just think I ought to do it there. There's a reason. And and so some of that, yes, fused into me as well.
Sure. You know, so you were sort of talking about this like, I guess, shared love or fondness for alliteration. And we have a question from Elvia Gudrian that kind of that builds on that. So just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your connection to particular kinds of syntactic style or word patterns, or sort of just like sound as it relates to language. And yeah, so that's the question. Yeah. So you said alliteration. Are there other things or other other pieces that?
There's you mentioned sound, and there are certain phrasings that she would do that, you know, just kind of like lifted you up on a wave and carried you, you know, and carried you on that wave. And so in Sermon on the War Plan, where she's talking about uh, uh, life, love, of course that's alliteration, but when she's talking about love like lion's eyes, love like morning rise, there's that internal rhythm and rhyme, you know, as well, that I like. I do sometimes like to play with. So so yeah, that's a piece of it. And and also to a very small extent, we impacted, we 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 affected each other. The tiger who wore white gloves is based on
I love this
a
story.
Halloween costume that I wore when I was about 9 or 10 years old. And because I thought that the costume needed something. So I got my little white Sunday go to church gloves and put them on with the costume. And I've said many times that when, you know, Mama got off the floor from laughing, she said she was going to write about that, and she did. The children's chapbook, Aloneness, is based on something that I said. And in fact, the quote is at the front of the book, where I talk about that, that I like aloneness, but I don't like loneliness. And so I was very excited when that came out and stuff. And being the child of writers, I said, "Ooh, am I going to get royalties from this?" And she looked at me and said, "You know, you always get part of the royalties." So
she's like, "What do you think your meals are?"
Exactly.
I love that.
You know, and then in Children Coming Home, there's a poem that talks about being, I am a gorilla. It was originally, I am a white gorilla. And she showed it to me. And I said, why does a gorilla have to be white? And she thought about it and she took it out. You know, so we were, I love the fact that we could talk about so much about the arts, about writing specifically, but also the other arts, about dance and theater, etc., and so forth. We were just very, very, very good friends. You know,
Yeah,
so.
I mean, like just from everything I've read and even having conversations with you over the years, it feels like there's a real, you know, not just a sort of mother-child dynamic, but like a real sort of kinship, a real sort of partnership in the work in a way that is really special.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. Mothers and daughters, I could get on her nerves. She could get on mine. So, you know, let's not, I don't want to try to paint this as some utopia where there were, you
Absolutely.
know, where nobody was ever snapping back or anything. That's not the
Absolutely.
but yes, we liked each other, you know. And I hear a lot of people talk about, you know, how they you know, that they have relatives that they have to love because they're relatives. And I'm like, no, I don't see that. I think
Yeah.
I
Yo,
don't
that's
think
a
you
blessing.
have to love somebody because they're related to you. But outside of being mother and daughter and artistic conspirators, we liked each other. We had fun. We watched CBS Sunday Morning, and sometimes we would watch the whole show on the phone, talking about what was on the show. You know, you know, she danced, which a lot of people don't realize, but there was a particular event at a Black theater, I think one of the Midwest conferences, and it was around the time that the bus stop was out, and she loved the idea of the bus stop, so she got out there on the floor and did the bus stop. And then she got stuck at one point where she couldn't remember what came next. And so she just stomped her foot until people turned and got back into the same place where she was. And then she picked it up again and kept going. And so
All the students are like now Googling bus stop dance move.
yeah, right.
So that they can like, they're like, I gotta see what this is so I can imagine it.
Yes, find that, look that up.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions. We're running close on time, but let me see if there's some that we can sort of address quickly. This is one from an anonymous, or actually we'll do this one from Willem.
Oh, and I do want to say there are
Yeah,
3 poems, short poems I do want to read. So
yeah, absolutely. So just out of Miss Brooks' sort of colleagues and friends, who influenced you the most, if anyone? You know,
wow,
that's like an interesting question. I never thought to ask that.
that's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Certainly, in the group of people that came to our house in the late 60s, I was mostly in early 70s. I was mostly downstate at college, but when I was there, some of the people that came were like, of course, Haki Matabuti, Walter Bradford, Nikki Giovanni when she was in town, Val Gray Ward, theater director, producer, Abena Joan Brown, theater director, producer of ETA here in Chicago, Lerone Bennett, you know, historian, who of course wrote Before the Mayflower and so many other wonderful books of history. Those are some of the people that I listened to and saw as mentors, but also friends and associates, you know. So and that was used for and against me. When I was in my first or second year of college, and Fred Hampton came down to U of I was so taken with the idea that I thought that I might want to join the Black Panthers. And Mama did not want that to happen. She was really terrified about that. And so, okay, it didn't happen exactly this way, but in my head, uh, because she brought in all of these different people like Haki and Walter and Lerone and so forth to come and talk to me about this. And so it didn't really happen that they were standing in a line on our front porch and that they would just come in one at a time and talk to me. It didn't really happen like that, but it felt like that because she had really lined these people up over a period of time to talk to me and talk me down from that. And I'm glad she did, because one of my friends, China Doll, was one of the people who was in the room when Fred Hampton got shot.
Yeah.
And so she survived, but she lived, but she ended up in jail and everything. Yeah. So for a significant period of time. So I, am probably glad that she talked me down from that.
Sure. So, yeah, we have some questions that we won't be able to get to, but I don't, maybe I can like bother you via text message and see. But I'll just ask this last one as a kind of layup. If there's, you already told us about the events happening on the 7th of every month, but we have a graphic Gwendolyn fan who's curious if there will be more installations of that project. And then if you wanted to end with a couple of poems of your mom's.
Okay. Yes, we want there to be more graphic Gwendolines. Our problem, quite frankly, right now, and this goes back to that whole thing about managing a literary estate and everything, is that you can't be 83 people at the same time. And so what we really need is somebody, volunteer, who can really come in and reach out to the places, for instance, that graphic Gwendolyn, that people really need to know about graphic Gwendolyn, to really have a connection. We reached out to several comic book stores and everything, but without much response. And so we need to have people, a person or people who can do things like that, so that we can actually get that book out there. And so if we're able to do that, then we would like to continue doing graphic Gwendolyn, but we're in the phase now trying to figure out if that's really possible. So yeah.
Sure. Thank you. And do you want to send us off? Thank you so much for your time. This has been, I think, really rich. I love the story about like you seeing Chairman Fred down at U of I and being like, yeah, I want to be a Panther. That's gold, like that whole piece. But yeah, if you want to send us off with a poem or two. Yeah,
there are actually, if we have the time, then there are actually 3, but they're all very short.
Yeah.
And the third one is just a repeat of something I did in the class. But these first 2, pre-1967, Annie Allen, there's one of the sonnets that my mother did, I just love, and especially the last couple of lines. Life for my child is simple and is good. He knows his wish. Yes, but that is not all, because I know mine too. And we both want joy of undeep and unabiding things like kicking over a chair or throwing blocks out of a window or tipping over an icebox pan or snatching down curtains or fingering an electric outlet or a journey or a friend or an illegal kiss. No, there's more to it than that. It is that he has never been afraid. Rather, he reaches out and lo, the chair falls with a beautiful crash, and the blocks fall down on the people's heads, and the water comes slooshing sloppily out across the floor, and so forth. Not the success for him is sure, infallible, but never has he been afraid to reach. His lesions are legion, but reaching is his rule. So post 1967. This is called A Little Girl's Poem, but it is now a children's book called We Are Shining, with lovely art by the incredible artist Jan Spivey Gilchrist. Life is for me and is shining. Inside me, I feel stars and sun and bells singing. There are children in the world all around me and beyond me, here and beyond the big waters, here and in countries peculiar to me, but not peculiar to themselves. I want the children to live and to laugh. I want them to sit with their mothers and fathers and have happy cocoa together. I do not want fire screaming up to the sky. I do not want families killed in their doorways. Life is for us, for the children. Life is for mothers and fathers. Life is for the tall girls and boys in the high school on Henderson Street. It's for the people in African tents, the people in English cathedrals, the people in Indian courtyards, the people in cottages all over the world. Life is for us and is shining. We have a right to sing. So, okay, last, really last, is the poem that I read at in the class that I said that I'm looking for world domination by this poem. And this is a poem that my mother wrote as a tribute to Paul Robeson, another name that people need to start Googling if they're not familiar with.
Get familiar.
Yeah. And what I will say about him is that besides being an actor and activist and just an incredible singer, he's also known for the fact that in Showboat, he sang the song Old Man River. And I mention that now because there is a reference to that within the poem. That time, we all heard it, cool and clear, cutting across the hot grit of the day. The major voice, the adult voice, forgoing rolling river, forgoing tearful tale of bale and barge and other symptoms of an old despond. Warning in music words, devout and large, that we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. Thank you for having me today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nora. That was wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this first installment of the Visiting Writers Series. The series will renew on Tuesday, October 5th with the poet Rajiv Mohabir. So we look forward to that. And we have a number of folks during this semester. The writer series will be all via Zoom so that we can best facilitate everyone's participation. And we look forward to it. Thank you again, Nora Brooks Blakely. Thank you all for attending, and we'll see you soon. Peace.
Thank you.